ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 4th annual Brain Health Awareness Week and our first event on Alzheimer's disease and its future. This event is live streamed, so I would also like to welcome everyone who's watching our webcast. My name is Dr. Nafisa Ismail. I'm a professor and a researcher at the University of Ottawa. My colleague, Dr. Richard Bergeron, is a physician, a professor, and a researcher at the University of Ottawa and at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. We will be your hosts this evening.
Alors, bienvenue à cette rencontre, ce panel qu'on voulait organiser pour vous donner plus d'informations sur la maladie d'Alzheimer. Comme vous avez peut-être vu dans certaines statistiques, il y a à peu près 500 000 Canadiens qui souffrent de la maladie d'Alzheimer à ce moment-ci. Et il semble que la courbe est presque exponentielle, donc on peut s'attendre que dans les 20 prochaines années, il y aura beaucoup de gens qui vont souffrir de la maladie avec toute la souffrance humaine que ça implique et les coûts sociaux associés. D'où l'importance de la recherche, détecter la maladie dans les délais les plus rapides afin de ralentir la progression de la maladie. Alors, cette semaine, c'est une semaine particulière qu'on appelle la sensibilisation de différentes pathologies en neurosciences, des maladies qui touchent le cerveau. Et ça fait partie des activités de l'Institut du cerveau de l'Université d'Ottawa. Alors, on a organisé un panel d'experts qui vont vous expliquer un peu ce qu'ils font de leur quotidien. Et le principal but de la rencontre, c'est de répondre à vos questions. Donc, on veut garder beaucoup de temps pour poser vos questions aux différents membres du panel. À ce moment-ci, j'aimerais inviter le docteur David Park, qui est le directeur scientifique de l'Institut du cerveau, à vous adresser la parole. Oh.
I like to do that. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome everyone. They tend to trot me out to say a few words, and it's my pleasure to do so. But the real stars today are, of course, the researchers that are going to be talking. I just wanted to briefly mention, for those of you who don't know, the Brain and Mind Research Institute really puts together the 5 academic hospitals in the Ottawa area, all the faculties in the university, and let's not forget Carleton, coming together to try and understand what the brain does and why the brain dysfunctions for tonight in particular with Alzheimer's and dementia. I do want to mention also that there's some incredibly exciting things that are going on in Ottawa, in the world, and we should be aware of this. So this evening is for you. Please ask questions, as Richard said, and enjoy the evening. So I'll be brief. Thank you very much again. Take care.
Alzheimer's disorder is a fatal disease that is characterized by a progressive decline in cognitive function. Currently, there is 500,000 Canadians that are suffering from Alzheimer's disorder and dementia. And it is estimated that because this is a disorder that is usually diagnosed in older individuals, demographic projections suggest that in 2050, there's going to be 1.5 million Canadians that are going to be suffering from Alzheimer's disorders. This is a growing problem. And it is not an individual problem. This is a societal problem that affects all Canadians at multiple levels. And so it is important that we join force, that we work together towards finding novel and effective treatments for this disorder. So this is why we have organized this evening today to give you information about the disorder and also to give you information about how we've been helping the population, what we are planning to do in the future to be more effective in helping the population. So we are going to start today first by having a panel of experts where we are going to be discussing how Alzheimer's disorder affects us really at multiple levels. So we are going to look at the legal implications, how family members suffer from this. So we're going to be discussing all that.
Alors donc, on va vous présenter notre panel et tout de suite après la discussion avec les membres du panel, on a invité Dr. Andrew Frank de nous faire une mise à jour de la recherche sur ce qui est en cours sur la maladie d'Alzheimer. Donc, les membres du panel, là, je vois à l'envers, je ne sais pas dans quel ordre je vais les dire, mais vous allez les reconnaître sans doute. Donc, il y a M. Mario Patry, qui est un notaire, avocat, qui travaille à Gatineau, qui a une grande expérience professionnelle pour tout ce qui touche testament, mandat d'inaptitude, à quel moment qu'on doit le faire. Alors, il va pouvoir répondre à toutes vos questions sur ce sujet. Il y a Mme Annick Millette. Mme Millette, elle est neuropsychologue, elle travaille dans une clinique privée, elle fait beaucoup d'évaluations cognitives, fait des évaluations aussi pour la cour, elle a une grande expérience donc avec les troubles cognitifs. Mme Sylvie Pilon, qui est une travailleuse sociale, donc qui évalue l'autonomie des gens, leur capacité de prendre des décisions, travaille en étroite collaboration avec des avocats. Et finalement, on a aussi invité un caregiver, quelqu'un qui a accepté de livrer son expérience avec sa mère a souffert de la maladie d'Alzheimer et à un niveau important. Il va nous raconter un peu ce que ça l'impliquait au point de vue familial et comment il a vécu la perte d'autonomie de sa mère. Alors, je pense que c'est très généreux de sa part de nous parler de son expérience personnelle. Il va être disponible pour... Donc, comment on va fonctionner? Vous pouvez vous asseoir. Je vais demander à chaque panéliste de résumer en 5 minutes ce qu'ils font, what they do on a daily basis in the professional work. And when everybody is done, we will go with your question and answer. Annie? Oui.
Est-ce que tout le monde m'entend bien? Parfait. Donc, bonjour, merci à tous d'être ici. Moi, je m'appelle Annick Millette, je suis neuropsychologue. I'm going to say a little part in English also after. Donc, c'est quoi un neuropsychologue? C'est pas quelque chose qu'on entend souvent. En fait, moi, je suis spécialisée en neuropsychologie. C'est une branche de la psychologie pour pouvoir évaluer les gens à l'aide de tests papier-crayon en clinique pour comprendre où sont les difficultés qu'on appelle cognitives, des troubles de mémoire, des troubles d'attention, organisation, planification, changement de personnalité, changement d'humeur, et faire un lien avec tout ça pour comprendre les difficultés. Est-ce qu'on est dans une problématique où on doit avoir un diagnostic ou une autre problématique où on peut faire un traitement et référer au médecin à la place. Donc, je suis vraiment là pour aider à préciser les difficultés, préciser les diagnostics. Mon expertise, je l'ai développée dans les domaines de la réadaptation. J'ai travaillé dans des laboratoires de neurobiologie. J'ai aussi travaillé dans des laboratoires de psychologie cognitive. Puis, je suis présentement dans une clinique privée où les gens viennent me voir pour différentes difficultés. Donc, je vois des enfants, adolescents, adultes, personnes âgées, mais avec la réalité d'aujourd'hui, les personnes âgées, les adultes deviennent une population un peu plus courante en clinique privée. Et la question que le 3/4 du temps je reçois, c'est « j'ai des problèmes de mémoire, est-ce que j'ai l'Alzheimer ?» Donc, on aide à répondre parce que c'est pas parce qu'on a des problèmes de mémoire qu'on a l'Alzheimer. Donc, il faut se rassurer sur ça. Il y a aussi un vieillissement qu'on appelle normal du cerveau. So briefly, I'm going to explain a little bit in English now. So, what is a neuropsychologist? A neuropsychologist has a specialization in psychology, and we help clients by providing testing, paper, crayon testing in clinic to better understand the difficulty, the cognitive difficulties, so memory, attention, organization, planning. And then we see if all those difficulties can be linked to a disorder or not. So my practice is mainly with, it's multiple children, teenagers, adult, elderlies, but I must admit with our population now, adult and older people are more common in clinic with the question, do I have Alzheimer's disease because I can see that I have memory problems in my everyday life. And as I said in French, it's not because you have memory difficulties that you have Alzheimer's, so you have to be careful with that. And we need to know the difference between normal aging and Alzheimer's or other type of difficulties. So please feel free to ask questions about those. I can help you with that part of the disorder. So I think it makes 5 minutes and a good idea of what I do. Thank you.
C'est bon? Okay. So, my name is Mario Patry. I'm a notary in the province of Quebec. A notary in the province of Quebec is a lawyer that does non-contentious business. So we do everything like a lawyer does, except we don't go to court. We don't want to go to court. We don't like going to court. And lawyers, well, they don't make authentic wills. They don't make marriage contracts. They don't make mortgages. We have different declaration of transmission, différents aspects du code civil qui sont réservés aux notaires, des actes qui sont réservés aux notaires. On disait tantôt que l'Alzheimer est en train de devenir un problème de société. Le législateur a reconnu ça au Québec. So the legislator recognized that Alzheimer is getting to be a problem. A societal problem, like the doctor just said. So the legislator adopted some laws pour encadrer les décisions médicales prises au sujet d'une maladie comme l'Alzheimer ou des maladies de fin de vie. Tant que vous êtes apte et capable, as long as you're capable of giving your consent, what I'm talking about is not for you, okay? Like, these advanced medical directives get enforced when you're not apt anymore to give your consent. So, how can we express our consent in advance, okay? It's by advanced medical directives. Directives médicales anticipées. C'est un formulaire qu'on se procure au gouvernement du Québec qui prévoit certaines situations. Ça ne prévoit pas toutes les situations médicales. Ça prévoit 3 grands genres de situations médicales. Situation de fin de vie, end of life care. Situation sévère et irréversible de fonction cognitive, you're in a coma or... And like in all of these situations, you give your consent or you refuse to cardiorespiratory reanimation, assisted ventilation, dialysis, dialyse, la dialyse, l'alimentation forcée ou artificielle. Alors, vous pouvez d'avance requérir un formulaire du gouvernement et exprimer vos volontés. Express your wishes regarding these specific situation. Register that at the government under your numéro d'assurance maladie, your health card number. And the doctor has the obligation. Again, I'm telling you, we're in the province of Quebec, but if it's a Quebec patient that is hospitalized here, the doctor has the obligation to go and verify if he has some advanced medical directives that are registered at the government. And if there is, the doctor has to, not may, not could, not, le médecin doit respecter les directives médicales anticipées. Il y a aussi une autre façon d'exprimer nos volontés quant à notre traitement de fin de vie, c'est dans le mandat en cas d'inaptitude, mandate in case of incapacity. Except with the mandate, we rely on our mandator. On doit se fier à notre mandataire, qui lui peut décider que il aimerait ça que tu vives 2-3 mois de plus, puis comme pas trop faire de cas du mandat en prévision d'inaptitude. Bon, c'est pas correct, mais il y a aussi dans le mandat en cas d'inaptitude d'autres situations qui ne sont pas prévues dans les directives médicales anticipées. Parce que les directives médicales anticipées, ça prévoit certaines situations, mais pas toutes les situations. Alors, it's wider. In the mandate, in case of incapacity, you can go wider. If you have a contradiction between your mandate in case of incapacity and your advanced medical directives, the advanced medical directives will override the mandate in case of incapacity. So the legislator, and ces directives médicales anticipées cannot be requested. Note that you cannot request medical aid in dying in advance medical directives. Dying in advance, c'est seulement pour les gens qui sont aptes et capables. Only for people that can express their wishes clearly. Okay? We cannot, by advance medical directive, go as far as that. But we can refuse cardiopulmonary resuscitation. We can refuse ventilator assisted. We can refuse la dialyse. We can refuse force feeding and hydration. So, voilà, that's what the legislator came up with, okay? And it permits the individual, while he's apt and capable, to decide how things are going to go when he's not capable anymore. C'est encadré législativement et on va respecter vos volontés. Puis on a établi des mécanismes, des lois pour pouvoir respecter vos volontés. Voilà, merci.
Merci, Maître Batry. Alors on peut aller avec...
Oui, avec plaisir.
Bonjour. Moi, mon nom, c'est Sylvie Pilon, travailleuse sociale. So I'll do a little assessment of what I'm saying in English afterwards. Moi, je travaille dans le réseau de la santé, puis je travaille aussi en clinique privée avec les personnes adultes, personnes âgées qui ont eu plusieurs traumatismes, différents traumatismes. Donc, mon travail, c'est, puis le travail des travailleurs sociaux, là, c'est d'intervenir auprès de la clientèle, mais aussi auprès de la famille, auprès du réseau, en situation de crise, en perte d'autonomie, en nouvelle situation. On le sait que ça apporte beaucoup de deuil, des capacités et tout, d'adaptation. Fait qu'on travaille là-dedans. Je fais de la relation aussi d'aide auprès des clients, auprès de leur réseau. On regarde aussi beaucoup le droit de la personne. Donc, à savoir, là, est-ce qu'on a besoin de faire l'ouverture d'un régime de protection, là, comme M. Patry parlait, là, faire le mandat en cas d'inaptitude, tout ça. Moi, je fais les évaluations psychosociales là, pour faire l'ouverture des régimes de protection aux besoins. Les homologations aussi en cas d'inaptitude. Je regarde aussi pour tout organiser le retour à domicile des clients. Regarder est-ce qu'il y a des services à mettre en place, est-ce que comment ça fonctionne le réseau, est-ce qu'il y a des services communautaires, y a-t-il des services institutionnels, y a-t-il des services privés qui peuvent vous aider, puis tout ça. J'accompagne aussi les clients, leurs familles, quand les gens ne peuvent pas retourner à la maison parce qu'il y a différentes situations. Regardez c'est quoi les options, regardez les différentes possibilités là, pour l'orientation. Puis je fais les demandes d'hébergement aussi aux besoins, là, tout ça avec la famille, avec le client, puis avec le réseau. Fait qu'on sait que la maladie d'Alzheimer, c'est une maladie qui n'affecte pas juste la personne atteinte, ça affecte toute la famille, tout le réseau autour. Puis c'est important là, de regarder tout cet aspect-là, puis chaque personne vit les deuils différemment, fait qu'il faut les accompagner à ce moment-là. Fait que c'est ça, il y a plusieurs services disponibles. Là. Moi, je travaille beaucoup sur le côté du Québec, mais il y en a aussi sur le côté de l'Ontario. Là. Il y a le CCAC là, qui offre des services, il y a le CLSC, mais il y a aussi des différents services. Là. Fait que si vous avez des questions, s'il y a quoi que ce soit, gênez-vous pas. So my name is Sylvia, I'm a social worker. Just briefly, what I do is I talk with people and their family and the clients and everybody to check to see what's going on, how they're feeling, what I can do to help them. I do some evaluation for mandate in case of incapacity and check to see if there's things that we can put in place, services that we can put in place to make sure that les aidants naturels, les caregivers, ils sont pas à risque d'épuisement, je sais plus, but because they're not at risk. Yeah, they're not burnout. I'm sorry, I was looking for that word. Fait que c'est ça. Fait que mostly, if you have any questions, I can answer, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna continue with Mr. Laviolette, who is our caregiver.
Hi, so I'm Richard Laviolette. I'm a caregiver with my mom. We started seeing signs from my mom in 2002 when her father passed away. And then the year after, her mother passed away, and my sister had cancer, so it started developing her memory issues. And we finally, après plusieurs dénis, puis des choses qu'on se cachait les uns et les autres, on l'a fait évaluer, and the diagnosis came in March 2010 that she was suffering from Alzheimer. So, avec là, s'enchaînent les deuils mensuels, hebdomadaires et journaliers. Today she can do something, tomorrow she won't be able to. So, comme on disait, it's a good sickness for them because they have no idea that they're sick. However, it's hard for the people who are around because you become like a 24/7, a caregiver, right? Because you never know when the care will be needed by the patient, by the person suffering from the disease. Fortunately, with my dad that we still had at home, my siblings and I were able to keep my mom until last year. So the care became too demanding for her around the clock. So elle a été admise à la résidence de la Pietà à Hull the day after her 74th birthday. C'est sûr qu'il y a des choses là, qui on vit des deuils comme je disais tantôt, le jour après jour, mais il faut aussi se souvenir des bons moments qu'on a eu avec eux autres. And what's important is that I don't try to bring her into today's world. I get into her world where she's not sick and where she's happy. Okay. She unfortunately now she's lost the ability to speak. Luckily for me though, when I go see her every week, when I call her mom, she turns around and looks at me. So she remembers my voice. So that's what I remember. That's what I keep down in my heart to be able, and I'm lucky enough to be able to give that care to her. So she is well deserving of it. So yeah, so we've been. That's it. You become everything, right? And I can be her daughter, her brother. She thinks I have really nice hair, by the way. I just love it. So that's why, like, you know, that we have to sometimes laugh at it because otherwise you'll just keep crying all the time. So.
Thank you to all of you for the interesting introductions. So we can now open up the floor to questions from all of you now that you have met our experts. For those of you who are in the amphitheater, I would request that you come to the microphones here if you have any questions. Alors, on va maintenant commencer avec la période de questions. Alors, vous avez rencontré nos experts. Si vous avez des questions pour nos experts, n'hésitez pas à venir au microphone ici. Et je demanderai aux gens qui sont dans l'amphithéâtre de venir ici dans cette pièce-là au microphone pour adresser leurs questions. Merci.
I can go? Thank you. My name is Jake Cole. I'm involved in this bad disease because, like the previous speaker, my mother went through it and my stepmother is now going through the same thing. And I guess we're all involved personally because it looks like this is likely or very likely to happen to all of us in the future. My question, though, is that we don't seem to be hearing anything about the cause of the disease. We keep hearing very accurate numbers about how many people have it, how many of us are likely to get it in a certain year, but why aren't we looking very hard at what caused the disease? Why doesn't every Alzheimer's patient go through a battery of tests of history? So we try to figure out what did they do, where did they live, how did they eat, what exposure did they have to environmental concerns, things like that. That doesn't seem to be happening. Am I right or wrong about that?
No, that is an excellent question. We are going to be addressing some of these issues that you've raised with our talk from Dr. Andrew Frank. So we're going to be talking about some of the causes of Alzheimer's disorder. Some of the issues that you've raised, we don't know much, unfortunately, about the implication of some of these, and they are part of the ongoing research projects that we are doing in the memory and cognition group that we will address in a moment. But perhaps we could ask Dr. Millet if she could help give us some of the symptoms that you diagnose and that you then identify an individual as suffering from Alzheimer's disorder.
Just to answer a little bit about the causes as we're going to talk about them, is that a lot of research is put into this domain. So just to reassure you that we are looking into those, but the reality is at the moment we do not have a specific cause. As for many other disease, it can be multiple causes that can trigger the Alzheimer's disease. We also seen in some people after death that the brain looked like someone that had Alzheimer. They had every signs, biochemical, everything was there, but no symptoms. So I can say that sometimes it depends on the brain per se. So that's why it is really important to keep a healthy brain, because more connection you provide to your brain, you have more highways for it to function. So if there is a hole in the highway and you have 4 lines, but 2 of them are broken, you're still working. But if you don't keep that mind into a healthy state, well then, of course, just a small amount of damage will cause a lot of difficulties in everyday life. So this is why for the moment, the best kind of help that we can have to better understand the disease, the disorder, is to look at the symptoms that appears in everyday life, and that's where my work can come handy. So for the symptoms, what I can say to look for, the most important one is when you feel that something is different and it's out of norm for you, that's when you need to go and see your doctor. Yes, there are specific signs to look for. Change in behavior, change in mood, personality. Yes, memory difficulties, but as I said, memory difficulties in aging is a part normal. If you're able to compensate by just having a calendar and look at it once a day and you're reassured, it's okay. If you have to look at it every hour, that's out of norm. Well, it depends. If you did that all your life, then it's not out of norm. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe you're OCD or something like that. So it's important to always look at 2 things. Out of norm for you and not able to function in everyday life anymore without quite a lot of help, either by tools or someone else. Then you need to consult. Your doctor is the first person you should go and look to see if there is something there, because we need to eliminate everything else that can cause the disorder. Hormonal imbalance in women aging. A lot of them in their 50s, close to 60s, come and see me and say, I think I have Alzheimer's. And I'm like, nah, it's something else. Normal, menopause. That will change, so it's not the same process, so we have to be careful with that. But we are seeing signs in younger adults that will or might lead to dementia. And I'm saying dementia because at that stage, sometimes it's hard to say, is it Alzheimer? Is it Lewy body? Is it frontal lobar degeneration? So there's a lot of signs, but again, I'm saying you have to be careful when you're not able to do what you were able to do before and you need help. Please do consult, and then the doctor will try to help to see what is the best testing, exams, route to take for you. I know it's not exactly the question you asked, but are you kind of reassured that there are a lot of research on that topic?
Well, if you want me to answer that truthfully, no.
No, it doesn't answer and it doesn't reassure you?
Well, no, I'm with the Sierra Club of Canada, and we try to conserve the environment, because we think the environment is generally getting worse for all of us. And if I look at possible causes for Alzheimer's, there's 80,000 chemicals that are now in our environment that weren't there 30 or 40 years ago. That would, just on the basis of straight deduction, probably have something to do with the state that we're in. Alzheimer's as a disease was never really considered in the past, except for very isolated cases. Now it seems to be quite prevalent. The world is more polluted than it's ever been before. Wouldn't it be a natural conclusion to suspect that maybe all that pollution is causing disease, and that a very good idea would be to look at those sources of pollution as our first step, as opposed to trying to come up with kind of defining the disease, and whether you have it or not have it, and things like that. It seems to me like the most important thing would be to determine the cause, and then go after that, and then worry about details about treating it.
I don't know if you,
My speculation.
Dr. Bergeron, do you know about a little bit about those?
So to finish very briefly, because we can talk about that for a long time, but the first reason why we get Alzheimer's disease, the first cause is aging. So the first risk factor is aging. But that's the issue, because the aging population will become more and more important, because the expectancy of life will increase all the time. And since the First World War, expectancy of life increased by 6 months per year. So that means in 25 years from now, expectancy of life might be 95, 100 years of age. So if we have no cure for Alzheimer's disease, a lot of us will be suffering the disease. So that's why research is very, very important. But yes, the cause that you were talking about, it's probably one of the factors also that can induce Alzheimer's disease. And very briefly, to finish on that point, always people ask, is it genetic? So if my father has Alzheimer's disease, I'm going to have Alzheimer's disease, yes or no? So it's about 10% of all cases of Alzheimer's disease where there is a genetic aspect. So if your dad is 95 suffering with Alzheimer's disease, there is no concern. It's maybe an aging process. But if your dad passed away at 55 or 60 of Alzheimer's disease, you may expect that maybe you may be suffering the disease a little bit more than the general population. But I'm sure Dr. Frank will give us a good overview during his talk in about half an hour. Okay?
Yes, you can come to the microphone.
So the way people have been talking about Alzheimer's today, it sounds very monotonic. You get it and it gets progressively worse. When my dad had Alzheimer's, he progressively got worse over time, but there were times when he was on, he was really my dad, and there were other times when he didn't know who I was or who anybody around him was. So it wasn't monotonic. So was that sort of peculiar to my dad, or is that a general phenomenon? I thought it was more general. And then to the question of regulation with advanced medical directives, the ability to give consent, if it is monotonic, is easy. Once you got it, it's easy to say you can never consent. But if it's up and down, back and forth, doesn't that complicate the concept of consent? Because when I'm down and I think I know what I'm doing, you shouldn't listen to me. But when I'm up and I really know what I'm doing, you should. And how do you distinguish? Does that create a problem in law?
Yeah, Maître Patry, would you be able to address this question?
the competent person to establish the capacity of a person to give her consent is his doctor. Okay, so he has a formation permitting him to see if the patient is situated in time and space, and ask him some questions. You don't need, for the application of advanced medical directives, you don't need to go to court or you don't even need to have a social worker to establish your capacity of giving your consent. At the time you give your consent, you consult your doctor, and if he evaluates that the consent is all right, well, that's it. He's the expert. And if he's not sure, well, I guess he will ask a higher level of expertise, like Sydney. Voilà, I rest my case.
Usually, at the rehab center, what happens at that time is they ask us to go and meet the person and meet the family and make sure that the person at that time is capable of knowing exactly what's going on and being able to know the consequences. Thank you. Of the decision that he has to make. So if he's capable of knowing exactly what can happen and things like that at that time, we can go forward. And usually I am present and working directly with the notary to make sure that everything is fine.
For the first part of your question, asking, well, we were talking about Alzheimer's disease is kind of a progressive, and it goes a little bit like that. Of course, in the first period of the illness, it's going to go up and down in the sense that the brain is still able to think, the person is still able to talk. As it gets progressively worse, usually we see kind of a downhill progress. The thing is, a dementia towards the middle and the end have a lot of symptoms that can be joined to another type of dementia. For example, Lewy body dementia has that kind of up and down pattern. But since they have a lot of symptoms that are common, sometimes it's hard to say which one it is, and sometimes it's both. At the end, we see Parkinson's disease symptoms happen. People have a slow gait, small little step. They kind of do not have any facial expression. So a brain is, how can I put that? The brain at the end has so many areas that are affected that of course we will see symptoms from other type of illness than just Alzheimer's. So yes, it's not a one-way trip, and as I said, each one of us has a unique brain. So we can have Alzheimer's, but for you, you will have some symptoms. For me, I will have others at the beginning, but at the end when we look, it's the same pathways that are affected, but maybe you were working in literature, so your pathways for language were more advanced than mine. So for me, maybe I was not able to compensate as easily. So my language abilities will decrease quicker than yours. But we will see for both difficulty with language, difficulty with knowing how to do some tasks in everyday life. We'll have memory difficulty, like learning new things. So those are the kind of bigger areas that we look at to make the diagnosis. But every person will show different ways in the everyday life, but they will have the same illness. Does that answer a little bit more of your question?
Thank you, Dr. Milek. So we'll take a question, the next question.
That's me.
Yeah.
A quick introduction. How many on the panel have played duplicate bridge? I believe it is the most pleasant way I have found to stop the gray matter from going black.
To follow up on your point, if you keep your brain active, you read, you socialize, it's always good to keep the connection between the neurons, it's always good. But personally, I tried to learn how to play bridge, no success. Failure, total failure for me.
My question is about what responsibility does the family doctor have to inform the family? My mother was diagnosed with dementia, but we didn't find out about it till she fell, and she avoided quite well and very intellectually all kind of contact and so forth. She used to play duplicate bridge. I am like you. I prefer taking courses than I do duplicate bridge. However, the family doctor did not let us know. I think from the learning I have done, because I've taken several courses since, that she had it in her early 60s and she died at 89. We knew about it about 4 years ago. She just died last year. So what responsibility does the family doctor have to inform the family of this dreaded disease and how the family can then become aware of it? Her behavior was quite aggressive, and most of us wanted to avoid her pretty much during her later years. Had we known about it, we would have been more compassionate and understanding and been more helpful. I was very helpful, as I learned in the last 4 years. However, I could have been a better daughter, I think, if I had known. And will the family doctors be given more responsibility to let the family know that their loved one has this disease and needs help?
Thank you. So we have Madame Pilon respond to your question.
It's a big question, but I'll answer what I know of it. I know that when the doctor see the client and the client is capable of giving the consent of not talking to people, and that they still are capable of taking their own decisions. Thank you. I'm sorry. Their own decision. I think that the doctor cannot tell the family, but for certain they can tell the person that it's important to inform the family. But I don't think that they can go and in their back and tell the family the information.
Just to add a little bit of information for that, one thing that we try to do, we're not family doctors, but when we have to give that kind of diagnosis or that kind of information, we always ask for the patient, like for my part, for someone else to be there, just because there's a lot of information and it's good for someone else to hear that information. So we try not to force, but to encourage the person to have someone else there, so that way we receive consent to give information to the family and therefore to better help that person. But if they are not willing to, they're not dangerous for themselves, they're not in imminent danger, they're able to understand the consequences, sadly, that is the regulation for confidentiality, and we have to respect that confidentiality.
Okay, so we'll take the quick last question, okay?
Okay, first of all, a couple of days before I came here, I saw a video on the internet where a certain Dr. Baylock was claiming that you could reverse Alzheimer's disease by a magical ingredient you find in health food stores. Okay, and obviously and the guy apparently is a certified medical doctor. Now, I mean, here, of course, I mean, with the brief presentation here, it's quite clear that you cannot do that. I mean, in terms of the official medical science, it's a very difficult problem of physiology, psychology, and all the rest of it. The other threat to Alzheimer's patients and people with a similar kind of condition is in Quebec, where the caretakers in the hospitals want to have the permission to kill those people without their consent. That's another nasty side effect of the assisted and dying laws that were passed by the federal government. Okay, that's just comment. You don't have to answer. I mean, you just don't have to answer.
We have I know a lot of interest with the audience to ask questions, but we'll move on to the next presentation, Dr. Frank. And as Nafisa said, we are available to answer any question on a one-to-one. And my panel, they are aware they have to stay here until midnight anyway, so there is no problem. You can ask any question. So the next speaker.
OK, alors merci beaucoup à tous nos panélistes. On apprécie énormément toutes les discussions qu'il y a eu aujourd'hui. On retient de tout ça que la maladie d'Alzheimer est une maladie qui affecte les Canadiens à plusieurs niveaux et qu'on a besoin urgent de trouver des traitements efficaces. Alors maintenant, je demanderai à nos panélistes de revenir s'asseoir, puis on va enchaîner après avec une présentation. Dr. Andrew Frank is a cognitive neurologist at the Elizabeth Bruyère Hospital and a medical director of the Bruyère Memory Program. In addition to being a productive researcher, he also runs an active clinic where he assesses patients with mild declines in cognitive function to see if they may be suffering from Alzheimer's disorder or other disorders related to dementia. Dr. Frank strongly believes that effective treatments are possible, that we need to work hard towards getting it. He sees memory as the language of the soul. To save one's memory is to save one's life. We are so grateful that Dr. Andrew Frank accepted to come and share his work with us and to talk to us this evening. So please join me in welcoming him.
It's a pleasure to be here today. And I want to give some additional answers to the questions that were raised tonight, such important questions. And I want to talk about the future of Alzheimer's disease. First off, though, a bit of an apology for a bit of a raspy voice, as I'm getting over a cold. But my hope is that the only part of me that's contagious tonight is some optimism. Optimism in the face of what is obviously a very bleak condition. For good reason. It's hard on people. We've heard about it tonight already. It's hard on their families, and it goes on for many years. It's like a public health crisis that's unfolding in slow motion. The long goodbye, as Nancy Reagan said. Optimism is in my heart, because I'm on the front line of drug discovery every day in this field. And while it's been really hard to find medications for this condition, I have seen a march forward, a slow march towards a destination that we can define. But yet, I can't quite answer how long that march will take. Will we have a future of new treatments in 5 years? Will we have it in 10 years? Will it be longer than that? That I'm not sure. But tonight, I want to tell you where we're going. But before we talk about the future, let's talk about the present. Some of the points I'll be bringing up have already been brought up tonight. But let's talk about it again. What's normal memory loss? It's true, there is. In fact, we have it all through our lives. No matter how old we are. Think about if you're stressed or tired. You're going to forget something. And I think as we get a little older, these moments come on more frequently. the senior's moment. So yes, as we heard, some memory loss is normal. Our job is to differentiate between what's normal and what's not normal, and what could be Alzheimer's disease. For example, forgetting the name of that actor. Oh, it's Gregory Peck. But it only comes hours, a day later. But it still comes back. That's a good sign if it comes back. Or why you entered a room. The classic. And you know, you could be any age. And I mean, I've had this my whole life. But if it comes back later, if the information jumps back after minutes or hours, that's a good sign, because it meant that the brain was working to get that answer for you. It just took a little longer. And that's normal. That's normal. So therefore, what's not normal? It was a bit slower. But what's not normal then? What do I see every day that gets me a bit more concerned? What could you look for that could make you more concerned about either yourself or a loved one, that could bring you to the attention of a family doctor? Well, it's forgetting really important events. Attending a wedding recently, having no recollection of that. An important appointment that was reminded over and over again, and still forgetting completely that it was to take place. That's different for you. Repeating questions after just minutes, not remembering you just asked it and got the answer. That's not quite normal. And that's usually quite different for someone. And if it's coming on over a year or two, gradually, that may not be normal. That could trigger that first visit to a doctor that we heard about. That could trigger a check for Alzheimer's disease. And by the way, I do want to talk about the cause of Alzheimer's disease tonight. We do want to know what's causing that disease. Because if we don't know what's causing it, how are we ever going to stop it? That's coming up. Memory loss, which other people notice in you, but you may not notice in yourself. That's critical. Why? Because you may be forgetting that you're forgetting. I know it sounds strange, but that can happen, and that's more serious. Flip side, if you're worried about your memory, but others are not worried about you, that's a good sign. That means you're aware of it, they're not so concerned. That may be normal. But if you're not noticing it in yourself, but others are worried about you, that's a good time to get some help. Memory loss, which starts to take away your daily functioning. See, this is very different for us because we're used to being independent. Well, taking medications, managing bills, shopping. Oh yeah, cooking and cleaning. See, I could never do that. So I never had it, so that's always been. But if you were a master chef, now over 2 years, could not get through a recipe, see, that's different. That's not as normal for you. Driving a car, very important issue that comes up all the time, very sensitive. And of course, resting and hygiene, that's quite significant. If that's becoming affected due to memory loss, that's likely not normal. So I hope that gives additional context for when to become concerned. And yes, visiting a family doctor is a very good place to start, as they can do a memory test right there in the office. And if needed, you could get referred to a clinic like mine, where every day we're testing memory, trying to determine, does this person have normal memory loss or not normal memory loss? That's what I try to answer every single day. So therefore, what is this word, dementia? Well, it has a very clear definition. It's a memory loss which is enough to take away independence. Because independence is very important. And that's what that means. So now, there can be a mild dementia. That means a little bit of independence is taken away. Moderate dementia means more independence is taken away. So with mild dementia, maybe just needing help with shopping. Moderate dementia, Help may be needed with dressing and hygiene, much more basic. And severe dementia, all independence, everything requires assistance. So there can be a mild dementia where a little bit of independence is lost, all the way to severe. And as you see, this is the tragedy of this condition, is that it's so devastating over its many years that it takes away memory and function. And it affects families too. We've heard that today, very poignantly. So what is Alzheimer's then? Is it the same? Not quite. Alzheimer's, to the best of our knowledge today, is caused by proteins in the brain. Now, do I know this 100%? No. There is still much to learn. But the way we understand it now is Alzheimer's is caused by proteins in the brain, which damage the brain cells, causing them to misfire, malfunction, and cause memory symptoms. These proteins start normal, but when there's too much of them, they start to destroy the brain cells. That's what our understanding today is that is what we think is the cause. Now, is pollution contributing to the buildup of this protein? Probably yes. Industrial chemicals? Probably yes. For example, I saw a study that showed that individuals living closer to the main highways in Ontario had a higher incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, couldn't prove 100%, but it was suggestive that if you were closer to that automobile pollution, you had a higher chance of dementia. Does that stand to reason that we want to have healthy air, healthy water, healthy food? Yes, we do. We definitely want those things. But could I point to any one chemical in our environment? I don't know if any studies ever found the smoking bullet, the smoking gun, when it comes to chemicals. But we know they're not good. So I agree with your point. But these are the proteins, which I'm going to talk about, which I think give us a window into treating the disease, because that's what we want to do. And if we can get there, that's the optimism. Now, Alzheimer's, the proteins of Alzheimer's, which by the way are known as amyloid and tau, T-A-U. These proteins, which define Alzheimer's disease, are the most common cause of dementia. There are, in fact, other causes of dementia, which makes dementia more of a global term or umbrella term. Stroke, which is where the blood gets blocked in the brain, that can cause dementia too. We call that vascular dementia. Parkinson's disease, or Lewy body, as was mentioned, that's another protein that can cause dementia. Head injury, we hear about that in the news a lot. Concussions also cause dementia. So, dementia is a blanket term. Alzheimer's is the cause, in that it is the proteins. And dementia is the effect, the memory loss and the loss of independence. And yes, there are other causes of dementia which are less common, but Alzheimer's, the amyloid and the tau protein are by far the most common. That is why you often hear Alzheimer's and dementia used interchangeably. But that's not exactly the case. And we're going to be focusing on Alzheimer's and those proteins for the rest of this talk. The long goodbye. 10 years from the beginning of symptoms to the complete loss of all functioning, long-term care, institutionalization, and death. You're right, sometimes those affected may not realize, and so maybe they're spared in some way. But the family knows, and the wonderful caregivers who are heroes, they are affected, and they know what they need to do, and it's hard. And this is really hard on society as a whole, because we know with the baby boomer population aging, that the numbers are peaking and will continue to do so over the next 25 years. This is a very important time for this condition in our society. Can we bend the curve? Can we interfere with this disease? before it affects so many of us? I hope I can show you that the optimism can be contagious. And you see, with each 5 years of life after age 65, the risk of getting this condition doubles. 2.5 at age 65, doubling all the way to 40% by age 85, so over 90. It's starting to become over half. And with the aging population, this is a public health emergency unfolding in slow motion, as I say. So in the US, tripling over the next 50 years, from 4.5 million to 13.2 million. In Canada, now 500,000. And according to the Alzheimer Society, in the next 15 years, this will be reaching nearly 1 million of our total population of 35 million. It's a significant number of individuals and their families affected. And to speak on the economic level, it becomes almost staggering that today it's $10.4 billion of care annually today, to say nothing of what it will become over the next 25 years. The name comes from the physician, Dr. Alzheimer. Not so much the first patient, but the first physician, a German pathologist and psychiatrist. 1906 it was. He had the first patient of a woman in her 50s, in fact, who was institutionalized at a, well, as they called it, an asylum for psychiatric disease at the time. She told him, "I'm losing myself," she said. He was convinced it wasn't a mental illness. He thought there must be something structurally going on in the brain. So he used the microscope, one of the newer tools. Say, I can find this under the microscope, and he did. Under the microscope, he saw that the brain was riddled with plaques and tangles, he called, material that should not be there. This was a structural problem. You could only see it at a microscopic level, but he, Dr. Alzheimer, was the first to see the plaques and tangles, give them names. More recently, we've come to give them names like amyloid plaque, the amyloid protein in the plaques, which build up around the brain cells, throughout our brain, and the tau tangles which appear within the brain cells, inside the brain cells, choking them, killing them, yes. And when enough of the brain cells are gone, that's what leads to the memory symptoms. If you don't have the brain cells, they can't function. And so the memory is lost, and then we see it in life. So he first saw it. For most of the 20th century, it was overlooked. It wasn't realized how common this problem was. It took until the 70s and finally into the 80s when we realized that most of what was called senility, which is now no longer used, was in fact these proteins building up, and we just didn't know it. And so by the 80s and 90s and into today, we have finally found a way to remove those proteins from the brain. And that's where our research is now, as I'll describe. Can we get those proteins out before the damage is done? This animation is just what is happening at the wrapping, the membrane, the wrappings of all of our billions of brain cells. They're all creating amyloid protein every day. This protein probably has a protective effect. That must be why we have it. However, with advancing age, more of this is made, and when there's too much of it made, it starts a cascade of out-of-control production. And when there's too much of this protein, this A-beta amyloid protein, it starts to stick to itself. And when it starts sticking to itself, it starts to damage brain cells in a major way. Then finally, these fragments bind to themselves as the plaques. And the plaques might in fact be protective because it's like a waste dump where they're being placed to get them out of the way. So the plaques of Alzheimer's might in fact represent where these collections are going to get out of the way. But before that happens, they're causing damage. Could that be an opportunity to intervene? I argue yes. I argue it is. Now, you may have read in the classical textbooks that the only way to know that it's Alzheimer's disease for sure is at autopsy. Because at autopsy, you can look at the brain under the microscope to see is the amyloid protein there, just like Dr. Alzheimer did. Thank God we've moved past that, because now, with the PET scan technology, and this has just come out over the past 10 to 15 years, and not yet covered by OHIP, and one day it will, but we have the ability to inject a tracer dye into someone who's very much alive. It'll enter the brain, stick to the amyloid protein, and create an image of the brain and show us that the amyloid protein is there. So here, my apologies. So here on the left is a dark brain, which is good, because that means the amyloid protein is not there. On the right, it's lighting up, meaning the amyloid protein is there. So here, you can see information only that could have previously only been gained through autopsy, imaged in a very living person. One day, this technology is going to become our standard of care. But before that happens, we're going to need a medicine that can remove the protein. And that's when this technology will be available to all. Right now, it's only available in research. The research that's testing the medicines that can remove protein, which I'll talk about at the end of the tape. Here, another animation. This is an even newer technology through the PET scan technology that is tracing and imaging the tau protein. That other protein I mentioned that builds up inside the brain cells, they're called the tangles. So now we can get a picture of the amyloid outside of the brain cells and even the tau inside of the brain cells. This is wonderful because you can see it forming in the areas of the brain. It's hard to see, it's spinning, but it's forming on the temporal lobes. These are the ones on the sides, underneath the ears, behind the ears. And that's where the hippocampus is. That's where memories are made. And those are the areas that get damaged, the new memories, short-term memories. Those are the short-term memories which are first affected in Alzheimer's, where someone forgets recent events and starts to repeat themselves over and over again, not remembering they just said it. It's because those areas are being affected. Now, if Alzheimer's is diagnosed today, can we do anything about it? Yes. We have medications for mild symptoms and for more advancing symptoms. These medicines have a modest benefit. They can help improve symptoms in the short term. They can perhaps delay progression to long-term care institutionalization. This has all been proven over the last 15 years. But are these treatments enough? Can they truly stop the disease? They cannot. We desperately need more. These treatments are worth trying. And we do try them in our clinic every single day. It's all we have right now. But do we need more? Absolutely. And are we going to get there? I feel we will. Can we prevent it in the first place? And this came up in the panel. We should all take stock of our vascular risk factors like blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, and weight, because this helps the circulation of the brain. And if you can keep the circulation of the brain, not only can you prevent stroke and heart attack in the heart, but you can flush that brain out and maybe get some of those proteins out too. These are important factors. Mental and physical exercise, well, that came up. Duplicate bridge, I believe. Social involvement. Balanced diet, very important. Healthy mood, quality sleep, also very important. They maintain our health. Now, will this stop all Alzheimer's disease and dementia? No, it will not. As we heard, even with the best of lifestyles, it can still happen. But will this maybe delay onset? Maybe. Might it slow the rate of progression if we got it? It probably does. It does increase quality of life. Yes. So while we can't fully prevent Alzheimer's with these strategies, they're highly recommended. And here it is. We'll be finishing now with what I hope is a bit of a contagious optimism. Despite what seems like a hopeless condition, there is a massive effort worldwide to discover new treatments. And I work on this front line every single day at Briere, and it's happening throughout Ottawa and around the world. We want to remove these proteins, which are toxic. We want to remove the amyloid and the tau. We start with what have been called intravenous anti-amyloid antibodies. Now, antibodies are small proteins which our body makes to fight off infections, like viruses, bacteria. Technology has allowed us to create antibodies, not against a virus, but against a protein itself. In this case, the amyloid protein. This can be injected intravenously. It crosses into the brain, sticks to the amyloid, and clears it out. It has cured Alzheimer's disease in mice, but we are not mice. So for the past 10 years, and I'm sorry to report this, for the past 10 years during my time at Briere, we've tested a number of these antibodies, and they have not yet worked. They have not yet stopped the progression of memory loss. And that is why the last 10 years has been a difficult time. And that is why you've not heard of any new treatments for Alzheimer's in the last 10 years. But with each failure, the trials have been refined. The measures of memory have been refined. The dosages we've used have been refined, sometimes increased for more potency, although we have to watch for side effects. We don't want to cause inflammation in the brain. Side effects are not good for medication development. We want effectiveness without side effects. But we continue to this day, throughout Ottawa, and again, and across Canada and the world, testing intravenous anti-amyloid antibodies to flush amyloid from the brain in hopes of stopping the disease. And we are testing this method in earlier and earlier memory loss, at the mild cognitive impairment stage, earliest stage. Because if we can intervene before the damage is done, maybe that's where we can bend the curve. Possibly all the trials we've done in the last decade had been started too late in the disease. Too much of the damage was done, so we couldn't reverse it. But if we can use the treatment earlier, maybe then we can get efficacy. It's like these tiny proteins stick to the protein the way they do to viruses and allow them to be flushed out. Here are some of the names of them. All of these can be Googled and researched. What about this? I'm so thankful for this, because as I've watched some of the failures of the anti-amyloid antibodies in the last 10 years, I've been waiting for this technology. It's been harder to develop. Can we get at that tau protein which is actually inside the brain cells? Can we get something that's removing the tangles, which are really at the heart of choking off those brain cells? And so yes, the anti-tau antibodies have finally come into clinical trials. Phase 1 is the first stage of human studies, and phase 2 studies, which involve larger amount of patients, will be coming to the Briere Memory Program and across Canada early 2018. I'm very anxious to begin the anti-tau antibody trials here in Canada, because it is definitely a new window on attacking this disease, which I hope will be even more potent than the attack on the amyloid. But both continue forward as we attempt to treat earlier and earlier in the condition, using those imaging technologies where we can actually see the protein in living people, using those images to find individuals at the earliest stages, giving them a treatment like this, which will hopefully bend the curve so that the future of this disease is not nearly as devastating. Also under investigation here in Ottawa and around the world, oral medications, not just intravenous, secretase inhibitors. They're oral medicines that basically stop amyloid production. So those are underway. and we're still waiting for results on those. Will they be more effective than anti-amyloid antibodies? I truly hope so. Copper and zinc metabolism has been implicated. That's under investigation. Nerve growth factors, you may have read about them, under investigation. Stem cell research, which has been mired in the ethical concerns of using embryos. Now, stem cell research can generate stem cells without the need for embryos and can be generated from your own body. This is a new area of research that I'm excited to explore. And also under investigation, pioneering research right here in Ottawa. Technology. Is there any way to use all of the advances in technology to allow individuals living and families living with dementia today to live better, safer, in their own homes? How about computerized cognitive testing to help us detect memory loss earlier using the precision of a simple computer game? What about cognitive testing at home on an iPad? A simple whack-a-mole game where you just tap the screen to test your reflexes. You can do it all day, every day, and the results are fed to the physician so that results can be given to the doctor or fed to the doctor all year long, giving a better profile of how someone is doing with their memory on an ongoing basis. These are currently technologies being pioneered right here in Ottawa. And this, in-home monitoring to allow safer living at home. Imagine a technology that if, well, a monitor under a bed mattress that can tell if someone gets up at night and is wandering. It'll instantly illuminate the way to the bathroom. And if someone leaves the bedroom and maybe heads towards the front door, which can be disastrous, especially in our winter or at any time, that the technology will actually create or play a recording of the spouse's or caregiver's voice saying, "Come back to the room. Honey, come back to the room." And that recording can lead the individual back to the room, and the sensors will know that the person has returned to bed. This might alleviate the stress on a caregiver whose own sleep has been terribly disturbed by someone's wandering at night. This is just one potential use of technology which is being pioneered right here in Ottawa. Just think of the potential of technology. And how the University of Ottawa and Bruyere are partnering now to forward all of these research goals. Early detection, early treatment, technology at home. This partnership is a first of its kind, and we're so pleased to be part of it. This is our program. It's at Elizabeth Bruyere Hospital in the Market. Fully OHIP covered. Referral from physician, usually a family physician, like we heard, a good first stop for a memory test if any of those more not normal signs arise in yourself or a loved one. We certainly do memory tests by a nurse and neuropsychology. CAT scan, blood tests, all very important to rule out other causes. In the end, we have an appointment with a memory specialized physician like myself to go through the results. And by the way, a third of individuals who come through our clinic are cleared as no Alzheimer's. Good news. As we heard, not all memory loss is Alzheimer's. It could be hormonal related. It could be normal aging. It could be stress, depression, or a sleep disorder. And we clarify that every day. If there is Alzheimer's, we start those treatments that I mentioned that exist today, those symptomatic treatments we have today. We create connections to the CCAC, social work, the Dementia Society, another huge asset to caregivers to provide that support. And we offer the research program to push forward all of our treatments and technologies. To conclude, dementia due to Alzheimer's is a threat to us, to our individuals, families, and of course society as a whole. especially in the next generation. We have current treatments, like the ones I mentioned, they're called cholinesterase inhibitors, Memantine. They have a modest benefit. It's a benefit, but it's just a modest benefit. We need more. And of course, management of vascular risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, lifestyle are so important to prevent or delay. And lastly, we have treatment for the underlying proteins, which I believe are the cause. This is our best research. The last 30 years of molecular science has pushed us towards the proteins being the cause of the brain cell damage. And if we can get those proteins out of the brain, especially before the damage is done, we've got a chance at bending the curve. And I remain optimistic that we might have such a treatment that passes its clinical trial within the next 3 years. But as I say, the last 10 years have been sobering. And so this march forward is proceeding, but will we get there in 3 years? Or will it be 5 years? Or will it be 10 years? Or will it be 15? See, that's the part I don't know. But yet I feel the momentum forward. And that is where I hope that my optimism will be contagious. Thank you for your attention.
So we have time for 2 questions. I was thinking maybe the members that had stood up before that didn't get to ask their question, if it is relevant for Dr. Frank, please come and ask your question. So there were 2 members. Dr. Frank will be present after for others who have questions for him. We will unfortunately only be able to take 2 questions at this time.
He actually answered most of mine, but I have one more. Because it's a disease of the elderly, and the older you get, the higher the risk. What's the difference between someone getting it at age 60 and someone getting it at age 90? Is it a, you hear early onset, late onset. Is there a genetic factor in early onset, and what is the difference?
As Dr. Bergeron mentioned, if onset is earlier than age 55 or age 50, I mean, these are extremely early onset, there's a high chance that it's a genetic cause. And we can perform genetic testing to check for a genetic marker that causes Alzheimer's. Again, the onset is usually very young, 50s. And if that genetic marker is passed on to others in the family, they will also get Alzheimer's at a young age. Now that only represents 1 or 2% of all Alzheimer's out there that is caused by a genetic marker like that. If Alzheimer's develops in the 60s, 70s, and beyond, there is unlikely to be such a potent marker present. There may be some genetic factor so that others in the family do have a bit of an increased risk, but there is no one genetic test that would show a marker in someone who develops it in their 60s or 70s or 80s. So there is just an increased risk in the family, but no particular test like those who develop it in their 50s. If someone develops it in their 80s versus 60s, it's probably because there was less of the protein present and a bit more of the vascular disease present, the decreased circulation I was talking about. So dementia in one's mid-80s could be some of the proteins and some of the decreased circulation combining. In one's 60s, there may be less of that circulation problem and more of the protein. So the reason that it might affect someone younger is that they were developing the protein more. They were faster. So if someone develops it younger, it means that protein was probably building up faster. Now, why do some people develop protein faster than others? I don't know if we know. Could it be pollution? Could it be lifestyle factors? Probably. But why someone would build up protein faster and present at age 62 versus at age 82, it's not yet known.
Thank you. So we're at the end. We'll take one final quick question, and then that's going to be it for today.
Could another cause for early onset Alzheimer's, say a female in her 50s, be from domestic abuse when she was younger and not necessarily genetics?
Can domestic abuse,
Like a head injury, like domestic
Yes.
abuse?
so head injury, is a risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Trauma to the brain does trigger some protein buildup. And now, does that fully cause Alzheimer's? No. But multiple head injuries increases risk for dementia and Alzheimer's. It has come out most commonly in the athletics world, where multiple concussions over many years causes dementia and in the brain the proteins of Alzheimer's. In domestic abuse, I would caution against fear that the injury itself will cause Alzheimer's, but statistically, we do try to avoid head injuries as it can increase the risk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frank, for this informative presentation. So the Brain and Mind Research Institute recognizes that Alzheimer's disorder is a growing problem. Researchers have been spending years working on trying to identify the causes and finding eventual treatments. But we've been working individually. The Brain and Mind wants to change that. So recently they have founded the Memory and Cognition Group that brings together all the researchers across the city of Ottawa working on memory and on cognition and on finding treatments for Alzheimer's disorder. The time has come for researchers to now work together, share their expertise, and share their technical abilities. So I would now like to request Dr. Bergeron to come and close our session this evening.
So I would like to thank all the members of the panel, Dr. Frank, and also just to let you know, we have a consortium of researchers doing a lot of work on research for Alzheimer's disease, from basic research using animal model, clinical research, and we have with the Bruyère Hospital and the Brain and Mind Institute fundraising. So we target to raise like $15 million in the next 5 years. All this money will be used for research and also for clinical care. And if you are interested to know more about that, you can go to the website, Brain and Mind Institute, and you will see also people doing research, what kind of research they do. And if you would like to support research, of course, it's probably the hope for the people that might become Alzheimer one day. And so we invite you to join us in our effort to fight Alzheimer. And the last word will be given to Dr. David Park.
Hey guys, thank you so much. Andrew and the panel, it was wonderful. I hope it was informative for you. Look, if I could just editorialize here and put in my 2 cents worth. So, you have to understand the challenge. I think Andrew did an amazing job talking about what we know, what science has brought us to know about amyloid and tau. What I think we have to stress, though, is that when we talk about memory and memory loss and cognition, we try and rectify it in cases like Alzheimer's. We have absolutely no idea how memory is encoded in the brain. Okay, so now think about that. We are trying to fix something that we know very little bit about. So, our hope, one hope, is that you can actually target what Andrew talked about, right? And maybe that will pan out. But in essence, we're trying to look at how that biological process affects a global thinking process that we have very little clues. And this is very important because the brain, we all know now, is, you've all heard about this, plasticity, right? So it's malleable, adjustable. So a little bit of damage causes the brain to adjust. So these processes is incredibly important, and along with the stuff that the panel discussed and Andrew discussed, really to understand how the brain circuits form a memory development as you are young, and how it happens when you're old is really critical. And that's one of the areas also happening in the UOB MRI, and I wanted to mention that because, of course, we have limited time and we're not really going to get to that. So, thank you again. I hope you had a great time. Please join us for the other days of the week, and see you next year.